The darkness. I'm not sure why I decided to explore that house. It was the kind of place everyone in town whispered about, the old Benson house that had been abandoned for over 50 years. No one seemed to know why it was left to rot, but the stories around it always hinted at something dark. I was bored one weekend, and curiosity got the better of me. I thought it would be fun to see if it lived up to the local legends. The house was a classic Victorian-style place, tall and narrow, with boarded-up windows and a sagging porch. Weeds had completely overtaken the yard, and the paint was faded to a dull, sickly gray. I felt a shiver when I saw it up close, like the house was exhaling a cold breath into the autumn air that I wasn't going to let nerves stop me, though. I found an old side door that had rotted away enough for me to push it open without too much effort. I stepped inside and was hit by the smell of damp wood and something else, something metallic, like old rust. It was dark inside, the only light coming from the cracks in the boarded-up windows that I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight to navigate. The place was a wreck. There were old newspapers scattered on the floor, yellowed and fragile, and the wallpaper was peeling in long strips. A few pieces of furniture remained, a dusty armchair, a toppled bookshelf, and a large, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. The air was still, and the silence was almost suffocating. As I wandered into what looked like the living room, I noticed something strange, a small wooden door under the staircase. It was about the height of a child, tucked away almost out of sight. It felt out of place, but I was too curious not to open it. The door creaked as I pulled it open, revealing a narrow passageway leading down a steep flight of stairs that I hesitated, listening for any signs of movement or life. There was nothing but the faint hum of the wind outside. I took a deep breath and started down the stairs. The air grew colder as I descended, and the smell, it was stronger now, almost like wet earth and rotting leaves. The bottom of the stairs was a large basement, completely unlit except for the beam of my phone's flashlight. The walls were made of rough stone, and there was a dirt floor with several deep cracks running through it. As I swept the light around, I noticed something odd, a pile of old toys in the corner. Dolls, wooden blocks, and even a small tricycle, all coated in dust and grime. It didn't look like anyone had touched them in decades. As I was about to turn back, I noticed something else, scratches on the stone wall near the pile of toys. They were deep and uneven, like they had been made by something with claws. My stomach twisted, and a sudden chill crept up my spine. Then, I heard it. A faint rustling sound, like something moving just out of sight. I swung my flashlight around, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow dart across the room. My pulse quickened. I called out, half expecting some animal to scurry away, but there was only silence. I was about to bolt back up the stairs when I heard something else, soft, almost imperceptible whispers. I couldn't make out any words, but they seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls. My flashlight flickered, and I felt a sudden drop in temperature. It was freezing, far colder than it should have been. That's when I saw it, something moving near the pile of toys. It was small, hunched over, and its skin was pale, almost translucent. It looked like a child, but the way it moved was all wrong, jerky and unnatural. It raised its head, and I saw its eyes, completely black, like two dark voids staring right at me. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, my footsteps echoing behind me. I could hear the whispers growing louder, almost frantic, as if they were chasing me. I reached the top and slammed the small door shut, stumbling back into the living room, but it wasn't the same. The furniture had changed positions, and the mirror that had been leaning against the wall was now upright, facing the staircase. I froze when I saw my reflection. It was me, but different. My skin looked pale, and my eyes were darker, almost black around the edges. It was like I was staring at a distorted version of myself. The whispers started again, this time coming from the mirror. I took a step back, and as I did, I saw something in the reflection that wasn't behind me, a figure standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me. It was that thing from the basement, grinning with its dark, hollow eyes. I didn't think. I just ran. I tore through the house, pushing past old furniture and debris until I burst out the side door and into the cold, crisp air outside. I didn't stop running until I was back at my car, gasping for breath that I didn't go back for my flashlight. I didn't even tell anyone what happened. But ever since that day, things haven't been right. I keep hearing those whispers late at night, and I swear I see shadows moving in the corners of my vision. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of something not quite right. It feels like a part of that house followed me home, and I'm terrified that one day, I'll see that thing again, grinning at me from the darkness. The outside. I wasn't expecting much when I found the old house. I was just out for a walk, trying to clear my head. I'd recently moved to a new town for work, and my days were filled with nothing but boxes and unpacking. I thought a little exploration would do me some good, so I wandered farther from the main streets until I stumbled upon it. A large, crumbling house at the end of a long dirt driveway that it was tucked away behind a line of tall, unkempt trees, almost like it didn't want to be found. The paint was peeling off in chunks, and several of the windows were cracked or missing entirely. The roof sagged in the middle, and the porch was cluttered with broken furniture and dried up leaves. It looked like it had been abandoned for years that I don't know why, but I felt an almost magnetic pull to check it out. I figured I'd just take a quick look around the outside, maybe snap a few photos to show my friends later. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly open. Just enough to see a sliver of darkness inside. Curiosity got the better of me, like it always does. I stepped onto the porch, trying not to make a sound. The boards groaned under my weight, and I half expected the whole thing to collapse beneath me. When I reached the door, I gave it a gentle push, and it swung open with a low creak. The air inside was cold and stale, and a faint musty odor hung in the air. The place was a wreck. The floor was covered in dust and debris, and there were old pieces of furniture scattered around as if someone had left in a hurry. There were also papers everywhere, scattered across the floor, piled on broken tables, even stuck to the walls like some kind of chaotic wallpaper. They all looked like old newspaper clippings, but they were too faded for me to make out any of the text. That I took a few cautious steps inside, my footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. There was something about the silence that made me uneasy. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind of silence that felt intentional, like the house itself was holding its breath. As I walked further into the living room, I noticed a staircase leading to the second floor. It was narrow and steep, and the wooden steps were warped and uneven. That I wasn't planning to go upstairs, but as I stood there, staring at the staircase, I heard something, a soft, distant noise. It was faint, but unmistakable. It sounded like humming. A low, continuous hum, like someone was trying to lull themselves to sleep. That I froze, straining to listen. The sound was definitely coming from upstairs. For a second, I thought I should leave. Clearly, there was someone in the house. But who would be up there in a place like this? And why were they humming? Against my better judgment, I started up the stairs. They creaked under my weight, and I had to hold on to the railing to keep my balance. When I reached the top, I was met with a long, dimly lit hallway lined with closed doors. The humming was clearer now, coming from somewhere down the hall. That I walked slowly, glancing at each door as I passed. They were all shut tight, except for one at the very end, which was cracked open just a few inches. The humming was coming from there. That I approached the door and hesitated. My pulse was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to see something I wasn't supposed to. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was empty. It was just an old bedroom with faded wallpaper and a dusty wooden floor. There was nothing in there, no furniture, no signs of life, nothing. But the humming, it was still there. Louder now, as if it was coming from inside the walls. That I stepped inside, turning my head this way and that, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. It was maddening, that low, steady hum. I pressed my ear to the wall, half expecting to hear some kind of machinery, but there was nothing. Just that strange, melodic hum, and then it stopped. The sudden silence was overwhelming, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I backed away from the wall, glancing around the room. That's when I noticed the trapdoor in the ceiling. It was one of those attic entrances, the kind with a pull-down ladder. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. I would have seen it when I first walked in that I stood there, staring up at it, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. There was no way I was going up there. I'd already pushed my luck enough. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard a loud thud from above. It was like something heavy had dropped onto the attic floor that I froze, gripping the doorknob tightly. Another thud followed, then a scraping sound, like something being dragged across the wooden planks. It was moving closer to the trapdoor. Before I could react, the ladder dropped down with a crash, unfolding itself in front of me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The humming started up again, louder than ever, echoing down from the darkness above. And then, I saw it, a shadow at the top of the ladder. It was tall and thin, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to twitch and shake. It started to climb down, but I didn't wait to see what it was. I bolted out of the room and down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. I could still hear the humming behind me, growing louder, as if it was following me. I made it to the front door and threw myself outside, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out of there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't look back. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear it, that low, continuous humming, echoing faintly in my ears. It followed me home, and now, no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to get rid of it. It's been days, and it hasn't stopped. Sometimes it gets louder, other times it fades to a faint whisper, but it's always there, like a constant reminder of that old house. And every now and then, I swear I see shadows in the corners of my room, just out of sight. I'm scared to go back, but I'm even more scared that whatever was in that house didn't stay there. The sensation. V always had a bit of an obsession with old houses. There's just something about them. Maybe it's the mystery of who lived there, or the stories the walls could tell if they could speak. So, when I found out about the old Whitmore house, I knew I had to see it for myself. The place had a reputation. People in the area said it was cursed, that anyone who went inside didn't come out the same. It had been abandoned for decades, sitting alone on the outskirts of town, hidden behind a wall of overgrown trees and weeds. The house was built sometime in the late 1800s, a big Victorian with a wraparound porch and pointed turrets that looked like they belonged in a horror movie that I went on a Saturday afternoon. It was cloudy, with a chill in the air that didn't feel right for the time of year. I parked my car a little ways down the road and made my way through the tall grass to the front gate. The iron fence was rusty and bent in places, and the gate itself hung crookedly, as if someone had tried to force it open and then gave up. The closer I got to the house, the colder it felt. I shrugged it off, figuring it was just the creepy atmosphere playing tricks on me. The front door was locked, but a window around the side had been broken, probably by some other curious soul like me. I climbed through, careful not to cut myself on the jagged glass, and landed in what used to be a living room. The air inside was heavy, stale. Dust coated every surface, and there was an almost tangible stillness, like the house was holding its breath. The floorboards creaked with every step, and the faded wallpaper peeled away in long strips, revealing bare wood underneath. Old furniture was still scattered around, an armchair covered in a filthy white sheet, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall, and a grandfather clock that had long since stopped ticking. As I wandered through the house, I felt an odd sensation, like I was being watched. It wasn't a sudden, startling feeling, but a slow, creeping one, as if the realization dawned on me gradually. I shook it off and continued exploring, moving from room to room, trying to imagine what the place must have looked like back in its prime. Then I found the staircase. It was grand, in that old-fashioned way, curving up to the second floor with a railing that looked like it was carved by hand. I stood at the bottom for a moment, staring up into the shadows. I don't know why, but the thought of going up there filled me with a strange sense of dread, like I was about to cross some line I wasn't supposed to, but curiosity got the better of me, like it always does. I started up the stairs, each step echoing through the empty house. When I reached the top, I was greeted by a long hallway lined with closed doors. The air was even colder up here, and it smelled musty, like mold and damp wood. That I opened the first door on my left, and it creaked loudly as it swung open. It was a bedroom, with an old bed frame against one wall and a small dresser near the window. The sheets on the bed were yellowed with age, and there was a large stain in the middle of the mattress that made me uneasy. I turned to leave, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of the room, near the closet door. That I froze, my heart pounding. I turned slowly, my eyes fixed on the spot where I thought I'd seen something move. The closet door was slightly ajar, a thin crack of darkness just barely visible. I stared at it, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, but then I heard it. A soft tapping, like fingernails drumming against wood. It was coming from inside the closet. That I backed out of the room, my skin crawling. I closed the door and took a deep breath, telling myself I was just imagining things. But as I walked back into the hallway, I heard the tapping again, this time from behind a different door. It was faint, but unmistakable, like someone was trying to get my attention that I wasn't about to open another door, not after what I just experienced. I headed back toward the stairs, but as I reached the top step, the air grew colder still, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just the temperature, it was like the atmosphere itself had changed. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and I swear I could hear whispering, too low to make out any words. Then I noticed something. The grandfather clock downstairs, dead and silent since I'd arrived, was now ticking. That I hurried down the stairs, my mind racing. The ticking grew louder with each step, echoing through the house. I reached the bottom, and there it was, the clock's hands moving in a slow, deliberate circle. But that wasn't the worst part. The door to the basement, one I hadn't noticed before, was wide open. That I don't know what made me do it, but I stepped closer, peering into the darkness beyond the basement door. It was pitch black, and the stairs disappeared into the shadows below. A foul smell wafted up from the depths, like something had been rotting down there for a long time. And then, from the darkness, I heard it, the same tapping, only louder now, echoing up the stairs. That I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, the basement door slammed shut behind me. The sound reverberated through the house, and the ticking of the grandfather clock grew frantic, like it was speeding up. I yanked on the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge, as if it had locked itself. Then the whispering started again, only this time, it was clear, almost as if someone was speaking directly into my ear. "Get out," it hissed, panic set in. I bolted for the window I'd climbed through earlier, but when I reached it, I found it was no longer broken. The glass was intact, the room just as dusty and untouched as before, except now, it felt like the walls were closing in. I grabbed a chair and smashed it against the window, but the glass didn't crack. It was like it wasn't even real, just a picture painted onto the wall. That I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway I just left. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a chaotic murmur, and the air became freezing cold. It felt like the house itself was alive, like it was breathing around me. Just when I thought I was trapped for good, I saw the front door. It was standing wide open, as if inviting me to leave. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward it and burst outside, collapsing onto the overgrown grass. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air warmed, the whispers stopped, and the house fell silent once more. That I don't know what happened in there, or why the house seemed to come alive. I've read about places that are cursed or haunted, but this felt different, almost like the house didn't want me to leave, or worse, that it wanted me to stay forever. That I haven't gone back, and I don't plan to. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear that same tapping sound, faint and distant, like it's coming from somewhere deep within the walls of my own house. And sometimes, I catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow that doesn't belong.